Okay guys, is your car doing this? Put on the brakes a little bit, it kind of quiets down. Turn left and right a little bit. Well, I'm going to show you how to make that noise go away, because chances are if you're having that noise, your car needs some service, and I'm going to show you the service it needs. Well, that was an awful noise you heard there on the intro. Hi folks, and welcome to this episode of Michael's Backyard Marina. Well, every now and then I got to work on a vehicle besides working on a boat or a motor. Well, this is my vehicle that I've had for many years. It's a 2011 Impala. I have put brakes on it at about 70,000 miles. I think it's where I put brakes on it originally. And now it's at 144,000 miles. The brakes are making some really horrible squeaking noise, as you heard. I'm going to show you what usually is causing that. I'm going to show you how I fix it. I'm not saying this is how you should do it, but this is how I do it. I'll give you as much instruction as I can. I'm not going to teach you how to take a lug nut off of your wheel to pull your wheel off your car. I'm not going to show you how to jack up your car. I'm just going to show you what you need to do to service your brakes. And on this particular car, I'm going to do all 4 brakes now. Normally, my experience has been, first time you do brakes, front brakes is all you really need to do, because the back brakes will last about 140 to 150,000 miles generally. Has been my experience. Not saying that's word to the gospel or word to the wise. I'm not saying that's a rule of thumb you live by. That's just what I've experienced. So this has 144,000 miles on it now. It's time to do the rear brakes. It doesn't cost that much to do the rear brakes, so I'm going to go ahead and do them. Now, I bought all my parts from rockauto.com. I'm not sponsored by them. They have great products. They have great delivery. I ordered them, got them here, and bugs. And now I'm ready to install them. Now, what I've experienced with my car is I heard this little fine chirping sound, and then it gradually got worse and worse till you heard what you heard in the beginning of the video there, which is pretty gnarly. Also, once I started hearing that chirping sound, I started paying attention to my brakes a little more, and I noticed my brakes were not stopping as far. My pedal was going down further and further, and so, that chirping sound is your warning signal. Get your brakes done before you get yourself in an accident. So let's jump in. I'm going to show you what I did to change the brakes out on this car, or what I'm going to do. I haven't done it yet. I'm getting ready to do it right here with you. And we'll go step by step as to how I approach it. You guys can do whatever you want. Also, once you got your car jacked up in the air a little bit, if you haven't rotated your tires and it's been over 5,000 miles since your tires were rotated, you're pulling them off anyway. Might as well rotate them around and keep that wear going as it should. Let's jump in right now. First things first, make sure you know where your lift points are in your car, and then put your floor jack or whatever jack you're going to use underneath that lift point and lift the car up securely till the wheel is off the ground, so you can remove your wheel and tire. Next safety step you want to take is put a jack stand underneath your car to make sure, in case your hydraulic jack gives out, that you have something that's going to catch your car and make sure it doesn't come down on you and hurt you or possibly kill you. It's always a good idea to jack the car up, then put the jack stand under, then let the car down onto the jack stand so the jack stand's taking most of the weight. Because if you don't do that, how do you know your jack stand's in a safe location? That's going to actually support the car in case the jack was to fail. Now what you have here is your typical caliper and rotor setup for your disc brakes. In order to get to the brake pads on here, we need to remove the caliper. And we have to remove the caliper also to get the rotor off the vehicle so we can put our new rotor on. Typically there's 2 bolts holding on your caliper. There's these 2 bolts here. Let me see if I can. They're on the outer edge here. They're actually holding the caliper to the bracket. Back behind here, now this is where I had my finger at before on this bolt. This holds the actual caliper to the bracket. Down here, there'll be 2 of these, one here and one down below, that will actually let you remove the caliper from the strut mount, or your spindle, I should say. So we want to take those two bolts loose, remove them completely, and we'll be able to slide this caliper out. In this case, it's a 15 millimeter socket that holds this particular one on. Now these, depending on the environment you live in, or where you live, these things can be extremely tight. And not necessarily because they were over tightened when they were installed, it's just the fact that these things will get tight over time. Now sometimes these can be difficult to get off, especially if there's some deep grooves worn in your caliper or worn in your rotor. That's allowing your brakes to not expand and get out of there. Typically you can just take the outer pad and just push it inward to get it out. Now surprisingly enough, these pads are still got a decent amount of life on them. So I think most of my noise might have been coming from my left side, driver's side. Now before I pull this particular, let's see if I can get you in the shot here. Before I pull this particular pad out, I'm going to go ahead and compress the pistons gently using that pad in a C-clamp to push those pistons back to where they started from. Because you'll need that space in order to get your new pads in. Now as you can see here, I've got the C-clamp around the outside of the caliper. I'm going through the hole here, and I'm going to slowly tighten this up, and the pistons will go back inside the caliper. The other thing I want to make special note of here is if you have been putting brake fluid in your car as time has gone on and people have checked it, the reservoir will be, obviously they will top it off. As these pistons come out, the fluid goes down in your reservoir. Well, what will happen when you go to push these back is your reservoir will overflow, because now with all this fluid pushed back, it will actually, all that has to go somewhere. And it's typically going to go all over your car. So make sure when you're doing this and pressing this back that you've got the hood up, the reservoir open so you can see to make sure it's not overfilling. Now I have this one pushed all the way back, and now we're ready to remove the pad that's against the pistons. And a small pry bar or an old screwdriver. I don't use my good screwdrivers as pry bars. You can get this thing out. Now the other thing I want to show you here, this pad holder here is supposed to float. And as you can see here, I can move this in and out independent of this piece here. And you want to make sure you can do that, because if you can't do that, you need to take this bolt and this bolt out and service the bolts that are in here. Whether it's clean them up, replace them, re-grease them, repair there's a boot on there. If the boot's leaking, they could have caused corrosion to get inside. Anyway, any number of those things that this thing's stuck, you'll need to address that, because this needs to float, because this floating back and forth, in and out, allows the pistons to relax, but it also allows the caliper to stay centered, the brake pads to stay centered over the rotor and not create unnecessary drag. If these are sticking, you'll have one pad always making contact on your rotor, creating an excessive amount of heat and possibly causing wheel bearing damage, cause your wheel to heat up, cause your tire to explode. So it's very important that these little details are observed. Now I've set the caliper out of the way. Do not let it hang by the brake line. That could damage it. There's a bolt. In this case, it's taken me what is it? This is a 4mm Allen wrench. Remove this little screw right here. If you don't remove this screw, you will beat on this like crazy and wonder why it won't come off. You remove the screw though, and typically, my experience has been, rotor comes right off. Yes, you can get these rotors turned. If you have the time to run these to a place that does turn brake rotors, if they're not worn too far below their minimum thickness, you can have them turned and put them back on with a new set of pads. For the cost of brand new rotors versus turning, I prefer to put brand new rotors on there because I'm starting off with something that's the proper thickness to start with. It is It's just a better way to do it all the way around, in my opinion. And rotors aren't that expensive to start with through Rock Auto. All right, now that I've got one side disassembled, let's dig into what came in my boxes here. Looks like here we got a set of pads and all the spring clips that come with it. Excellent. And it looks like we got 2 rotors. Now these rotors may feel clean and dry and free of oil, but they're not. They will have a coating on them that is to prevent them from rusting when they're shipped in shipping containers overseas. Or even if they're made domestically. As you can see, there's some residue on here. That needs to go away, because that will inhibit your brake pads working properly right out of the gate. And you wonder why your brake job sucks. That'll be why. So we're going to go ahead and take some brake cleaner. Now, I find it handy to have this brake clean around. I use it on my outboards a lot to clean up grease and stuff. But also, it's designed to clean your brake parts. So I'll take this and I'll flood it and flush all the oil off this part. And then we'll be ready to install it back on the car. Now it's time to reinstall your rotor back onto your hub and reinstall your little screw here that we took out with the 4mm Allen wrench earlier. Now as you're tightening this, wiggle this around, tighten up your Allen wrench. That'll help self-center it. Give this a gentle snugging. You don't have to tighten it until the water runs out. Another thing I'll make sure I do is I don't touch the brake faces anymore with my hands. I'll be honest with you, I use a can of brake clean. You might think that's wasteful. A can of brake clean per rotor. I flush and flood that stuff on it to get rid of any oils and residues. Now that we've got that back in place, let's grab our caliper and bring it back up on top, and we can set it right on top of the rotor here. It's not going to hurt a thing. And we're ready to shove the new brake pads in. Now, I probably won't be able to get you a lot of great detail right here, but here's your new springs. This came with, I bought the kit with springs because you never know what kind of condition these are in, and it just doesn't hurt to replace these. What these do is create tension on your brake pads so that when you hit bumps and stuff, that your pads, you don't clap and rattle and make all kinds of extra noise that they don't need to make, and to keep the pads in a nice position. In order to remove these, they're just a little bit of spring tension holds them in place, and there could be a little bit of corrosion depending on the climate you drive in. You know, if you live like where I live, where they put salt all over the dang roads and try to, prematurely rust our cars out with it, it drives me nuts. So yeah, we're just going to pry these out of here, and we'll get the new ones slid in. Just take note of how the old ones are in there. Why? So you can make sure you put them back in the same way they came out. Well, that wasn't easy, but I was able to get those manipulated back in there. Holy smokes. Once your pads are back installed, we can go ahead and put this back around and hang it right over the rotor. And put our bolts back into place. All right, just like that, that caliper is now done and assembled and ready to put the wheel back on. Now, one thing you want to make sure you do, in case you didn't watch this video any further past this moment, when you go to get in your car and put it in reverse or put it in forward to back out or pull out of the garage or the driveway or whatever, before you put it in drive or reverse, pump your brakes a few times until you feel a good solid pedal, because you want to work these pistons back out so the pistons and the rotor are making contact again, and you may find yourself pumping it 1 or 2 times to get those pushed back out to make contact. I'm just saying that because I don't want you to get in an accident because I decided to put it in reverse and then put my foot over the brake and then realize my car is rolling backwards and I just rolled into a ditch or another car or through my garage or any other number of things that could happen. So just fair warning there. Now, I'm going to go to the back brakes. I'm not going to show you the driver's side. The driver's side should be identical to the passenger side. in the same process and procedure that I just went through, unless I run into another issue that I didn't run into on this side, and I'll share that with you. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and do the back wheel. Once I do the back wheel, then I go to the other side and I'll do the front and the back on the other side, and the brake job will be complete. So without further ado, let's put this wheel back on and retorque the lug nuts and go to the back wheel. Now I use my impact to put those on, but I will check the final torque once I put it back down on the ground. Same as the front, you'll find this little Allen wrench screw that you need to break loose. It actually turns out 4mm is not the thing, it's actually a Torx. And just as we did on the front, we'll remove the 2 bolts here on the back side that hold the caliper in place. It would appear that these are a 13mm. Now these never being off the car before, I'm anticipating to be pretty tight. Now this rotor may be pretty well stuck. The good news is, bearings sound good. You may have to take a steel hammer and give this some love taps to break it loose. Or a love tap. There we go. Now as you can see here on this brake rotor, normally the pads come clear out to here. And you can see that I've lost about 1/3 of my braking surface due to the pad wear or just corrosion or things in general. Something was rubbing on here. It wasn't a pad though. So that's why it was time. Even if the pads aren't fully worn out, which these back ones actually are worn pretty good. Same as the front, you want to make sure this caliper part floats. This thing should float back and forth. And if it doesn't, you might need to do some more service here. I'm going to go ahead and stick the regular bolts back in so I can see if this thing moves like I want it to. Just need something to hold it in place for me. Now this caliper, there we go. It does. It floats very freely. Perfect, exactly what I needed. Sometimes you just need that third hand called a bolt put back in place to, because it wasn't like it was stuck, it was just barely stuck, but I couldn't get my fingers manipulated good enough to make it do what I wanted it to do. Take a look at that pad. That was getting right down to paper thin. And actually that chirper spring right there, I'm sure is one of the springs that were rubbing. Okay, let's take a looky here. What I did is I made myself a little spanner wrench. I just welded 2 pieces of 3/16 rod to an old antique junk socket I had to make a spanner wrench so I can turn this caliper back in. Now I'll leave a link in the description down below of where you can buy such a tool if you don't have the means to make your own. And now what you got to do here is rotate this clockwise as looking at it from the face to wind this piston back in. This is a self-adjusting situation here with your emergency brakes. So we're just going to turn that back in until she's in there far enough to accept the brake pads. Once you get it all the way back, you'll know you got it all the way back because it won't go any further back. And make it so that these slots that are in your piston are this way. So when you put your pad in, I'll show you the pad. One of your brake pads will have a pin on the back, and one of them will not on this set I bought. The one with the pin will go back in here, and that pin falls in to that little groove on the piston. Now to make life a little easier on myself, I'm going to go ahead and disassemble this part off of my caliper. I'll back out while I do that. So now we got the caliper loose from the bracket. We'll just take the bracket the rest of the way off here. This is going to allow a couple things to happen a lot easier. One of them being getting these springs on and off. So much easier. Then I can take this over to my wire wheel now and clean it up. Now this is an excellent time to go ahead and pull these out and put yourself some fresh brake caliper grease on these so that these move and actuate like they should. Now that we got the parts all wire wheeled up, we can go ahead and put our new little keeper springs back on here. Same as the front. We cleaned this rotor off thoroughly with some brake clean, so it had 0 oils and manufacturing lubricants on the rotor itself. And now we'll reinstall this screw. The caliper back on here, at least this portion of it, just like that. And we'll install the piston. Now with all that on, we're ready to install the wheel and torque it down. Alright, as you guys well know, I'm willing to admit when I made a mistake. What I showed you in the beginning there is one way to take the calipers off. An easier way to service these things is there's 2 bolts right here that will actually remove the piston part of the caliper. And you can actually get that out of the way. Now that wasn't quite metal on metal yet, but we were getting close. Now we're moving free. Well, that was a little bit of a problem there for sure that I could tell you. That was stuck. And once you got this out of the way, we'll go ahead and take the bolts to get this off so we can take the rotor off. Now what I did here once again, I did this on the front too, but I just didn't show it, is I pulled these out, wiped them off, put some fresh brake caliper grease on there. I'm guessing they call it brake caliper grease because it's designed to handle some high temperatures. As I mentioned on the other side, there's one of the pad has a little bump sticking out on it. You want to make sure that is on the inside toward the piston. And when you screw this piston in, like I said, you want to make sure this is pointing in this direction toward the center line of the rotor, because that's going to line up on that pin that's on the back of this pad. The last thing you want to do is double check to make sure your reservoir is full. Now this one is a clear reservoir, so I can see the fluid is clear up to the full mark. So that's nice. So that fluid's good. The brakes are now, I took it for a test drive. The brakes are absolutely quiet now, which is really, really nice. Doesn't sound like I'm driving around a piece of junk. Hard to argue with the results. Well, folks, I hope you found this video informative and helpful. And I hope you can do your own brake job and save yourself money by watching this video. I'll leave all the parts, numbers, or whatever that I bought from Rock Auto to do the job on my vehicle here. Now, there again, this is a 2011 Impala with a 3500 V6 in it, 3.5 liter V6, 16-inch alloy wheels. It's an LT. Don't know what else to tell you there, but go to Rock Auto. You can look up all your own parts. There's plenty of choices to choose from. I'll leave the link in the description below for the choices that I chose for my rotors and pads. You guys can choose your own brand, a little bit cheaper, a little bit more expensive, whichever way you want to go. I went upper middle of the road for price, just because I want these to last another 70,000 miles. Yeah, this car has 145,000 miles on it now, and guess what? I'll probably be still on it when another 70,000 miles rolls by. I hang on to my stuff for a while, and I don't mind driving the older vehicles. And I do all my own mechanic work, so there you have it. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys get out there and take on a challenge yourself like this. It's very rewarding when you have a job that's completed. This thing is now really, really quiet. When I pulled into the yard, I had the windows down, and I didn't sound like a bunch of people dragging shovels and rakes down the middle of the highway. It was really bad. It sounded really bad, as you heard in the beginning of the video. But, well, I'm out of here till next time. You guys get out there and have some fun. Here I am saying it again. If it ain't broke, fix it till it is. In this case, we just plain old fixed it, right? This is Michael, and I'm out. Happy dance, 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 happy dance. We got the brakes fixed.